Hi, I'm Kat, and I'm an interior designer with almost 10 years of experience, and I'm here to share 5 trends that I think are on their way out for 2025. So I want to start by giving a disclaimer because if you saw my last video on me saying how your home does not have to be aesthetic, I still stand by that. Your home does not need to be aesthetic and you do not need to follow trends, but I find trends really interesting because I feel like they're a window into what is going on in our society, and I think they can really give insight into kind of our collective psyche as a whole. And I also think it's really valuable to understand what's trending and what's not, because it's not cheap to follow trends. Especially for interior design, it's really expensive to renovate your home and to invest in pieces for your home. I don't think any of these trends are necessarily bad, and all of them I actually do really like. But I do think that if you're to put all 5 of these trends in your home, that you might be tired of what your home looks like in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. So if you want to make an investment that really lasts in your home, then it is valuable to know what the trends are and what is going on in the world of trends. I also want to mention that all trends follow a trend cycle, and it kind of looks like a bell curve. So all of the trends that I'm going to be sharing today have all, in my opinion, peaked in the last year or so, and that's why I think they're on their way out. So I still think we're going to be seeing a lot of these trends in the coming year. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with these trends. I think these trends can be really classic and timeless, but I do think we've been seeing a lot of them this past year, and that's why I think they're on their way out for 2025. All right, so that's my disclaimer. So let's jump into the first trend. So the first trend today is green. Green had a huge moment in 2024. I think a lot of us were having a brat summer, and green was absolutely everywhere. We've been seeing green for a while now. It really started a few years ago with Gen Z green, and you're seeing green in all sorts of fast fashion with younger people. And it was really that lime green color that we now associate with brat. And that color really peaked this past summer. We've also been seeing the trend of green slowly growing in homes. A few years ago, we were seeing it in interiors in more this sort of banana leaf pattern with a lot of green foliage and kind of leafy patterns. And that green has definitely evolved into more of a soft, muted sage green in the past couple years. And especially in this past year, we've been seeing a lot of color drenching in interiors, specifically with the color green. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a lot of people on social media and just people I know in my life painting their homes this color green. How many rooms have we seen that look like this? And I have to reiterate that I don't think that there's anything bad with green or wrong with green. Green is an extremely classic color. Green is the color of nature. And I think as long as humans and trees exist, we are going to like green. But green has definitely been having a moment the past few years, and I've been seeing it everywhere. I knew that the green trend peaked when most of the home items and clothing items that I was shopping for came in the color green, and sometimes only came in green. For example, this past year I bought these planter pots from IKEA, and they only came in green. And so when green starts to be our main option when shopping in stores, you know that the trend has peaked. So if you painted your home green, don't worry, you don't have to get rid of it. Green is classic, green is timeless, and if you love green, then go for it. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot less of green in the coming year. The next trend that I think is on its way out in 2025 is checkerboard. And don't get me wrong, I love checkerboard. I'm literally wearing a checkerboard sweater right now, but we have been seeing checkerboard everywhere. I swear over half the images of interiors I see online from this past year have some element of checkerboard pattern in them. We've not only been seeing checkerboard in clothing from the past few years, but I've been seeing it in furniture, in rugs, in tile and flooring. Literally, if you name it, I have seen it in a checkerboard pattern. And I still think we're going to be seeing it a lot in 2025, but I think it has definitely peaked this past year and that we will start seeing less and less of it in the coming years. Again, I love this trend, I really do. But when you start pairing it with all the other trendy things, like let's say it's green checkerboard and you have some of the other trends that I'm going to mention in this video, it's going to start to look very 2024. And I think if you want longevity in the design of your home, home, you don't necessarily need to stay away from checkerboard, but maybe just use it in key places and don't have it everywhere, and don't pair it with a bunch of other trends because you might be tired of it 5 years from now. This next trend has been out for a while, and I think we're really not going to see much of this in 2025. And that is very stark white spaces with high contrast and a lot of Scandinavian design influence. I would say about 10 years ago, this trend was really at its peak, and it's really been on the way out for several years now. And again, don't get me wrong, I think that light, bright spaces can be really beautiful, especially when there's a lot of texture and maybe warmth in the wood. But I do think that all white spaces have been really oversaturated for the past several years, and we're going to be seeing a lot less of them in the next year. I think we've been seeing this trend play out even in makeup and fashion. For example, in makeup looks, there's been a lot less contrast and a lot less emphasis on, say, big eyelashes and bold lips, and it's really been a lot softer and more subdued. And I think that trend is reflected in the larger trend in interiors, because I think we've been seeing so much of these bright white spaces with maybe dark black accents and black faucets and light fixtures, and there's just been a lot of really stark contrast. I think we've been really seeing a shift happen towards darker, moodier, more muted colors in our interiors, because I think we're really craving a sense of coziness, especially after the pandemic when a lot of us were stuck in our homes. I think we're really seeking comfort in our homes at this point in time, and I think that's reflected in sort of warmer, earthier tones and less contrast overall. Gone are the days of stark white interiors with lots of gray. Say hello to muted colors and brown. This next trend I love, but is so oversaturated, and that is arches and squiggles. So I love a good arch. I love it. But we have been seeing so many arches in the past few years to the point where they're everywhere. How many of us have seen a wedding or a baby shower that has something like this? And how many of us have seen arches painted on walls, say behind a bed or a desk? A few years ago, I almost did this in my own home, and I'm glad I didn't because it was definitely a trend that fizzled out pretty quickly. I think arches can be really timeless and classic, especially when they make sense with the architecture of the interior. We've had arches since Greek and Roman times, and they're not going anywhere, but I do think we've seen such an oversaturation of them where they've been absolutely everywhere and in every trendy space that, again, when you start pairing arches with all these other trends that I'm mentioning in this video, it's going to look very much like 2020 to 2025. And I think those very trendy spaces are going to look very dated in a few years. Along the same lines of arches, I've been seeing a lot of squiggly shapes. And I feel like we first started seeing this with this squiggly mirror that we saw a lot of influencers having. And since this mirror, I've been seeing squiggly mirrors everywhere. I've been seeing squiggly shapes in all sorts of furniture, like coffee tables, sofas, in lighting, even in the hardware on doors. And I'm also going to group scalloped shapes and kind of amoeba shapes into this whole squiggly shape category. Also pill shapes. All of these kind of rounded shapes I've been seeing so much of. And I think rounded shapes are here to stay, but I think we're going to start seeing them in a lot more organic forms rather than this perfect arch and perfect squiggle that we've been seeing a lot of lately. Again, there's nothing wrong with a good arch and a good squiggle, but when you start pairing them all together, it's going to look really trendy. For example, this space right here I think is really fun. Don't get me wrong, I love the timber wood on the walls. I love the checkerboard trim on the ceiling and all the squiggly shapes in the furniture and on the trim on the walls. But when you see it all together, it definitely looks like it's of this time period. Same for this image. We have the squiggly banquette along the wall, along with this sort of organic squiggly shape in the shelving on the wall. And this image actually leads me into the next trend, which I think is out for 2025. And that's a trend that I like to call Postmodern Caveman. So this trend is sort of reminiscent of the Flintstones, in my opinion. This trend uses a lot of soft, matte textures, but takes a lot of influence from the postmodern era with a lot of playful geometric shapes and also playful use of color. And I have been seeing some version of this shelf everywhere. I actually don't mind this trend when it's done in a more subdued, neutral way, but I think once you start adding in all these postmodern elements with sort of funky colors and all these chunky shapes in the furniture, and if you start pairing that with arches in the color green and even checkerboard, it starts to become too much. This image here I think is actually doing a good job of this trend, and you can see a lot of trends in this image. We have sort of the postmodern caveman furniture and more natural materials like in the matte concrete of the ceiling, and there's also the trend of terrazzo and arches and timber wood on the walls. So we're getting a lot of trends in this image, but I think it's still working because overall it maintains still a pretty neutral palette, and the arches make sense with the architecture of the interior on the ceiling. So I actually don't mind this trend in an image like this. Same for this image. It's using green, it's using those kind of chunky postmodern funky furniture elements and the matte earthy textures in the ceiling and on the floor. And I think this one is really working because overall it still maintains a very neutral, subdued palette, and it's not overdoing all the trends. I think there can be a lot of fun elements to the sort of postmodern caveman style, but once you start pairing it with all the other trends, it can look very trendy and specific to our time. So for example, with this image here, we not only have the arches, the green, we have squiggly patterns on the floor, we have those kind of postmodern caveman Flintstone shelves on the back wall, we have the chunky geometric furniture in the boucle, and it looks like the floor is terrazzo, which is another trend that I didn't really mention in this video. So there are a lot of trends happening in this one image. I think spaces like this are going to feel very dated in a few years. And then this space here has the checkerboard, it has the squiggly headboard, it has the boucle, which we see a lot of in this trend, and it has this very chunky geometric postmodern furniture. This space just feels very much of this time. And I think we're going to look back and think like, wow, that was very 2024. So just to reiterate, there's nothing wrong with these trends, and I really enjoy a lot of elements from all of these trends that I mentioned in this video, but I do think when you start seeing all of these elements paired together in one space, it starts to look very much of our time, and I think we're going to be tired of it in a few years. So before you go investing a ton of money into the design of your space and different furniture pieces, really ask yourself whether it's a reflection of your own individual style or if you're just being influenced by the trends. And if your own individual style is arches, checkerboard, green, postmodern caveman, by all means, go for it. Because if you love it, then you won't be tired of it in a few years. But it's good to know the trends so that you can make an informed decision before you spend a bunch of money on your space. So that's it for this video. Let me know if there's any of these trends that you absolutely love, or maybe you are completely sick of. I'm going to be posting another video of trends that I think are here to stay for 2025 and that I've been really enjoying. So look out for that video soon. And I also want to do another video soon on the trends that we'll see in the coming years and really talk more about the psychology behind the trends that we're going to be seeing and kind of what it says about the state of our world. So if you're interested in interior design and these kind of topics, then please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!